major set: antisocial, pro-criminal attitudes, values, beliefs, and cognitive emotional states. What are cognitive emotional states? Things like rage, anger, defiance, criminal identity. You see yourself as a gang member, as a thug. How are you going to act? Gang member and a thug. Rage, we've all experienced it, right? You get cut off on the freeway, you're going to go after that guy. Who's he think he is, right? You're in cognitive emotional states. That's not how you normally think and behave. You're angry. Right? We see that. We see this with people all the time. Pro-criminal sentiments are what people think. It's not how they think. It's the content of thought, not the skill of thinking. Mm-hmm. These are things you listen for. Negative expressions about the law. It's not fair. Everybody does it. I got caught. Mm-hmm. Negative expressions about conventional institutions, rules, authority. Not into that 9 to 5 thing. Never did well in school. Teachers don't like me. Often have that short-term thinking. I don't see through the consequences. I interviewed a parolee the other day. I said, "Are you working?" He said, "No, I quit my job." I said, "Why?" He said, "I wasn't getting enough hours." I said, "How many are you getting now?" He said, "None." I said, "You're kind of moving backwards. Most people don't quit their job till they get another job. You went from 20 to 0. He said, "Yeah, but I showed them." It's that kind of thinking. They don't think through the concept. Most of us would say, how am I going to pay my bills? I need to line another job up. But they just have that really short-term linear thinking. Negative expressions about self-management. They say that. I'm not very good at that. Never been into that before. That school thing. And of course, lack of empathy and sensitivity toward others. Who'd I hurt? If I wanted to use drugs, that's my business. Well, you saw the video, they hurt their families. Sometimes they're victims, right? And so they don't see that, though. And it's because they really, many times, are just concerned about themselves. They minimize their behavior, neutralize their behavior. This is a set of verbalizations that function that basically what I did wasn't so bad. And these are things you hear. That criminal acts are due to factors beyond their control. They deny responsibility. I did it, but. You're about to hear, right? That denial of responsibility. I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I was high, I don't remember. My favorite, the some dude defense. Some dude told me I could drive that car. Some dude, we're looking for some dude, by the way. Crime's going down 20%, but it moves around. Right? Deny injury, admit the act, but minimize the harm, right? You hear that? I did it, but. I stole their car, I just drove it till it ran out of gas. I beat them up, I've been beat up worse. That kind of that minimization. Deny the victim, reverse the role and blame the victim. Two that are good at this, sex offenders and domestic violence. They will meet you at the door to tell you why they shouldn't be there. System bashing, those who disapprove are immoral, hypocritical, and criminal themselves. Certainly you've done these things. You've driven drunk, you've used drugs, right? And what they're really saying is, see, I got caught, I'm unlucky. And finally, of course, gang members live by a different code. Demands a larger society or sacrifice for more immediate demands. Number 2, one we're all familiar with. Your mothers were familiar with it. And if you're a parent, you're familiar with it, right? Who you hang around with. It's a major risk factor. But it's not just knowing criminals. It's not having pro-social people in their life. I always tell Steph, when you assess an offender, you don't want to just know who they get in trouble with. Ask them who they don't get in trouble with. Ask them who in their life never gets into trouble. Maybe it's a grandma or an aunt or somebody. Because if you can strengthen those relationships, because what do? They stay away from them when they're in trouble. They know they don't approve of it, right? But we all know this is a big risk factor. We do, and it's one that drives me crazy because when I look at what probation often does, it's all around risk management. You can't hang around with known felons, right? Make a list up. Curfews, electronic monitoring, and so on. All designed to manage that risk. It doesn't reduce that risk, though, because the minute you go away, they go back. to the same people, places, and things. So you've got to teach them the skills they need, and I'll show you some of that later on this afternoon. Number 3, one that's often overlooked, temperamental and antisocial personality patterns, weak socialization, impulsivity, adventurous, pleasure-seeking, restless aggressiveness, egocentrism. It's a myth that low self-esteem is correlated with criminal conduct. It's high self-esteem that you have to worry about. Okay? You interview high-risk offenders, it's all about them. I remember years ago we were doing testing a new assessment tool in Ohio for kids. And our you call DJJ, we call DYS. They brought them all into a reception center, and the kids were all there to get assessed. And I thought to myself, most of these kids have never been away from home in their life. And they're going into institution now. They're going to be there 2-3 years, some of them. All right, so think about how you would have felt at 15 years old going into that kind of environment. And we had a question we asked them. How cool do you see yourself? On a coolness scale, 1 being not cool and 10 being really cool. The kids that scored high risk, you know what their typical answer to that question was? 11.5, baby, I'm off the charts. You're in an institution. That's their self-image. That was how they saw themselves, right? So egocentrism, taste for risk, weak problem solving, and coping skills. They get into situations and they don't know how to get out. They do what they all do. We're all familiar with history of antisocial behavior. And I think one of the people on the tape, too, said it. He said something like, well, I got in trouble before I started doing that. And I thought, you know, when you get a lot of drug offenders in a room and you ask them what their problem is, they will all say drugs. And hands will all go up. And then started asking them, how many of you finished high school? How many of you had steady employment? How many of you got in trouble before you started? And you'll start seeing what we see in the data. About half of them got in trouble before they started using drugs. Only about 25% drugs led directly to their criminal involvement, and about a quarter simultaneously. For many, it's just part of the lifestyle. Right? It's just part of the antisocial behavior. It's not that it doesn't happen in isolation, but oftentimes when you're dealing with 23, 24-year-olds, you know, that's just part of what they do. There's lots of other behavior that goes along with it. Number 5, family factors that include criminality. You saw that in the tape as well. Right? So your father was in prison, your mother's in prison, that's a risk factor. Problem is, it's a static risk factor. I can't change it. I can't change it. You can target the kids, and I recommend you do. You know, it's actually an easy group to identify. You can get a list from the department of which parents are in prison, and you can start programs for those kids. There's been some places that have done that. That's actually a pretty easy group to identify that are at-risk kids. But for offenders, family, but it also includes low levels of affection, caring, and cohesiveness. Having people in your life that care about you, that you care about. For kids, it includes poor parental supervision and discipline, and outright neglect and abuse. Low levels of personal, educational, vocational, and financial achievement. And that's the key word there. We're going to talk more about this. It's about achievement, about how you view work, how you view school. Low levels of involvement in pro-social leisure activities. And finally, alcohol and drug abuse. These are what we call the major set. There are some minor risk factors, but these are the ones that form the basis of most assessments, and most people coming through your doors are going to have some of these factors.